In the thick of doubt and uncertainty, Thomas found himself at the feet of Jesus. Yet, despite his inability to believe that Jesus had risen from the dead, Jesus did not push Thomas away, nor did he rebuke him for not having faith. Instead, Jesus invited Thomas closer, and he accepted him fully, doubts and all. This encounter transformed Thomas's life, and some 2,000 years later, it set an example of the loving patience and tender care we find in Jesus, for me too. My name is Kat, and like Thomas, I found myself wrestling with doubt, constantly fearing what others might think of my lack of faith, and always wondering whether it would disqualify me as a Christian. But, as I waded through the waters of uncertainty, Jesus walked beside me. He began to teach me a new narrative of what it meant to have faith, showing me a love like no other, and a kindness that healed the wounds that fear had left me with. Through the mercy and grace of Jesus, I learned that my dance with doubt did not disqualify me from God's love. Instead, it gave me an opportunity to dance with Him, learning the rhythms of His love with each step, and finding a peace like no other in the comfort of His arms. Growing up, going to church was just part of the fabric of life. It was my weekly weekend ritual, nothing more, nothing less. But unlike many of those around me, I never seemed to have a real, tangible encounter with God. The kind of encounter people describe as life-changing, and exactly the encounter I believed was an essential ingredient in what it meant to truly have faith. Because of this, for a long time, church remained to me an event I simply attended out of habit, rather than a space where I could find meaningful and intimate communion with God. As the years went on, I continued to wrestle with doubt. It became more and more obvious that my feeling of complete disconnection from God was very different to everyone else around me. The less I felt connected to God, the more I believed that something was wrong with me. I was trying my best to grow a relationship with God, but it was like He wasn't even there. I was a teenager at the time, so the combination of teenage angst and a crisis of faith seemed to push me further and further into believing that I was the problem, that I was the one who was broken. When I went to university, I tried my absolute best to grow a relationship with God. I did everything I could to try and grow my belief. From church to youth nights and every Christian thing in between, I filled my life with events and experiences which I hoped would flick on my faith like a magic switch. I was desperate to feel how I believed I was supposed to feel. I wholeheartedly desired to have a faith like the people around me. Shortly after I'd finished my degree, I started working for a church. At this point, I was still trying my best to force an experiential faith in God, still in a relentless pursuit, trying to find what I thought faith felt like. Yet little did I know that in the fragile, frenzied state of my soul, everything would soon come crashing down, taking any shred of my faith with it. After years of denying what I felt, and after trying on innumerable occasions to push my doubts as far away from me as I could, I just gave up. The doubts, questions, fears, and uncertainties of faith I had experienced for so long completely overwhelmed me. My mind swung back and forth between the questions, is God really there? And what's wrong with me? Never landing on one particular wrestle, desperately hanging in the middle of those unanswered questions. I felt so lost, and my questions seemed to become more and more daunting. I didn't know what to do or who to go to. It left me isolated in shame, guilt, and a terrible fear of what people would think if they knew how I felt. How could faith be so hard to find? And how could I be in these Christian circles, but still in a persistent tug of war with my own doubts and uncertainties? I found myself falling prey to a vicious cycle of comparison, always feeling that I was failing compared to other Christians around me. For a while, this comparison only damaged my faith even more, eventually diminishing my belief altogether. I was at rock bottom, unsure where to go, unsure who to turn to. But thankfully, that wasn't where my story ended. While I thought I needed a massive, miraculous, life-changing encounter to restore my belief in Jesus, God showed me that through the small, mundane, everyday moment, He could work just as powerfully. And that's what happened. Slowly and steadily, when I was at my lowest point, my faith began to be strengthened and I experienced Jesus drawing me ever closer to Him. It was a slow and steady process, but it was an experience of being held securely in the hand of God. I began to discover the grace and love of Jesus, outworked through the humdrum moments of my life. Little by little, these seemingly insignificant moments started to add up, showing me that real and lasting faith can be built by the small things. As I began getting to know Jesus in a way I had never thought possible, the fear of questioning that once trapped me began to fall away. I started to learn that those questions I once felt ashamed of were normal, and that doubting a God who is filled with great mystery and the unknown wouldn't disqualify me from His love. I felt affirmed, accepted and loved, able to come to God with all my questions and doubts. As I leaned into the doubts I had, I began to feel an amazing sense of freedom. Doubt had opened cracks, but those cracks allowed faith to seep through to the depths of my heart, where Jesus began to work. I felt not just validated in my doubts and questions, but also completely and entirely loved. I didn't have to have faith like those around me. I simply had to trust God and give myself over to Him. Doubt had stripped my faith bare, but it also gave me the opportunity to truly discover what it meant to have faith in the first place. For the first time, I wasn't comparing myself to others and relying on their faith to shape mine. I was getting to know Jesus from scratch and discovering what faith in Him meant on my own. It looked different to those around me, but it was a faith that was drawing me closer to God. Wrestling with doubt brought me to my knees, but it was there that I found Jesus kneeling beside me. Despite what I had once believed, I realized that Jesus was not deterred by my doubt. Instead, just as He had done with Thomas, Jesus invited me closer, doubts and all. He was patient and loving, understanding and kind. I now know that Jesus doesn't see doubt as a sign of weak faith. Instead, I believe He invites us to wrestle with doubt, facing the pressing questions of life and faith head on, and in the wrestling and wondering, that's where our faith begins to strengthen. For so long, I had feared how Jesus would respond to me and the doubt that I had allowed to cripple me. But just as He had done for Thomas, Jesus drew me closer despite the doubts I had. He didn't walk away from Thomas, and He's never walked away from me. Over the years, I've learnt that everyone's journey of faith looks different. For some, that wrestle is a minor moment. For others, it becomes a great battle. Yet Jesus invites us all into communion with Him. He meets us exactly where we are and exactly how we need Him to. For me, Jesus saw the hard layers of hurt and fear that captured my faith. He gently peeled each layer away with the love and care of a gardener tending his garden. While my faith had felt stripped by the winter-like bite of comparison, He nurtured it back to health and gave it the care it needed to blossom. I still grapple with doubts today. I still find myself asking questions I may never find the answers to. But as my faith has grown, and my understanding of God with it, I've learnt that doubt cannot diminish the love of Jesus. He is not afraid of the questions we pose against Him, nor is He put off by our insecure uncertainties. Instead, He moves towards us with mercy and grace. He stands with us as we wrestle, never abandoning us, and He loves us without hesitation. Like Thomas, I danced with doubt for many years, and although that dance lingers on today, it is Jesus who choreographs the steps in tune with His unfailing, never-ending, and ever-perfect love.